Norfolk is a magical collection of the unusual and inexplicable in the county. From folklore to ghosts, witchcraft to natural wonders, magic to enchanted places, we tell the kind of stories you share on dark nights around a campfire. I'm Stacia Briggs and I write Weird Norfolk.
And I'm Shufra Connor and I curate Weird Norfolk. Welcome to Weird Norfolk. So this is a really interesting story. So last week we were talking about the horror of Heigham and the ghost. Well, this is another ghost story that might have come off the back of this, the follow-up actually, because for the follow-up we went into a little bit more detail about the area of,
we mentioned Hangman's Lane.
That was it.
Yeah.
We mentioned Hangman's Lane, and a resident of that area contacted us just out of the blue and said, I used to live very close to there and I had lots and lots of weird stuff happen in my house. Do you want to hear the story?
She was not wrong.
No. And we were like, yes, we want to hear the story.
Yes.
So obviously we haven't named the house. We know which house it is, but we haven't shared that because people still live in it. She doesn't live in it anymore. She's moved out. Which we obviously didn't want to freak people out, and we've changed her name because she wanted to be anonymous, which is completely that's reasonable. We're more than happy.
In the business of ruining people's lives.
No, we just want to share really good stories, basically. So I thought for this episode we'll kind of read through the story in the way that she tells it, and we'll just kind of see what happens.
Freestyle.
We'll just see what happens.
Jazz.
I wanted you to do some jazz noises then.
I am in my head, if that helps.
So, to start with, the house in question is an unremarkable Victorian terrace close to the crossroads formed by Old Palace Road, Dereham Road and Heigham Road. Our story spans 20 years and begins when Jill, not her real name, brackets, bought the house near Dereham Road with her husband. She was 7 months pregnant when she moved in with her husband. Jill had fallen in love with the Victorian terraced house and she was very excited to move in. It wasn't long before paranormal activity would begin. Jill's daughter had arrived and the family had fallen into a new routine when strange things started to happen.
And didn't they?
Yes, they did. Obviously, the first thing to note is the stuff started happening at a time of high emotion when there was a new...
Yeah, and it was a daughter, and girls are far more likely to attract.
Yeah, I mean, she was a baby at the time, so
maybe she was very hormonal baby.
Yeah, I was going to say it's not usually till teenage years, is it?
So 11.
But we don't know how old Jill was.
No.
So she could have been young herself, couldn't she? We don't actually know that. It began with slamming doors and footsteps on the stairs, usually at night, normally at precisely 2:50 a.m. when the alarm clock, set for 7 a.m, would ring. As the years passed, the strangeness inside the house built up. After the breakup of her marriage, Jill and her daughter remained in the house alone. Oven timers and lights would switch themselves off. Items of laundry would be removed from the bottom of the pile and thrown on the floor. Jill would be sitting on her sofa and it would feel as if someone was banging into it from behind. Glass storage jars flew from the shelves. Toys and buttons appeared to fly from the air as if thrown. The piano played on its own. One night, Jill's daughter came to ask her, "Mummy, why do you keep coming up and downstairs and slamming the door?" I mean, so that's like
all of that,
and that seemed to all. So she doesn't actually tell us that much that happened during when she was there with her husband.
No.
So it was like just the alarm clock going off at the same time every day, even though it was set.
Yeah.
And later on, I think she does say they did buy a new alarm clock because that continued happening all the way through. Yeah.
And anything that did happen would happen at that time, or a lot of it. Although it did also happen in daylight. It happened, And I think she was very particular when she gave us this story, and I took the notes she'd written and I made it into our story. And because I don't want people to be surprised or upset by what I've written, and because I was putting her words into mine, I sent it to her for copy approval, which we're not allowed to do and we're supposed to not to do, and I do very rarely.
It's only very special occasions that you would do that.
And she was very particular about the part about the sofa and the banging, and how it was it kind of wasn't on the sofa, it was kind of banging behind the sofa. And I'm fairly sure from what I can work out that possibly might have been where the understairs cupboard was, which turns out to be an area of problematic nature. So she said it was really very strong, this banging, and they would be sitting there. I mean, can you even imagine? I mean, if it was mine, I'd just assume it was the boiler, to be fair, because that does bang, unless it is a poltergeist.
It's really, I think, the thing is, with this sort of case, I think you would know if it was the boiler.
Well, I think if your alarm's going off in the middle of the night, if you're hearing footsteps, and it's not just one thing, is it?
Yeah, unless there's so much. So another incident with her little girl, it says, while on another occasion, the little girl told her that she heard a voice in the bathroom saying, "Here you are." And then when she turned around, expecting to see her mother, no one was there.
Yeah, it's... I mean, the little girl kind of says quite a lot, doesn't she? Or there's quite a lot that involves her.
Yeah.
That in itself would scare me, because it's just... I don't know, if it's you, and she's the mother of a very young child, I'm not saying you go mad, but you're living there on your own, noises do seem strange if you're on your own, don't they?
Yeah.
Shadows look different when you're on your own, the dark looks different, everything looks different. And I can see how that would be even more heightened if you had your kid there with you.
Yeah, because children do say weird things.
Yes.
Don't they?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I don't have children, so I've not experienced it, but I have friends who have had children, and they're like, "Oh, my daughter said this," and you're like, "Oh my God, really?"
And we've done stories about kids that have had entire conversation. We've come across loads, haven't we? I think at some of our live events, we've had people who've said that, they had whole conversation. We had was it in, I can't remember where it was it in Yarmouth area, where there was the girl who didn't want the poltergeist to move out, and they exorcised it.
Was that this?
Yes, maybe.
Yeah.
And somebody who had whole conversations and was interviewed much later on and remembered this chap who had kind of been her friend, who was
she didn't. I don't know. It's quite unnerving when there's children involved in it, because I think as well, children. It's really hard to, because they have amazing imaginations, but also I don't know why they'd make this stuff up. No. Like whenever I come across it, it often seems like they're just going.
It's just a normal
thing. It's not like, oh my gosh, I saw this and this and this. It's just like, oh, I just so and so was in the garden, and you're like, who is so and so?
If they're very young, it's easier to believe them. Whereas when they're older, I know you kind of look at stuff like the Enfield haunting and the poltergeist that was at Enfield, and I know that the lady who experienced most of that was a teenage girl at the time, and no one believed her.
No.
And it's easier not to believe a teenager, because it seemed very strange what was going on there and other witnesses, but teenagers are more knowing because they've been around longer, haven't they? Whereas if a child tells you they've seen something, and it's quite obvious that they're reporting it as fact, not as a kind of, then I saw a hippopotamus, or, it's more difficult.
I guess with the teenagers, there's a kind of an always are they just doing this to get attention? Whereas like very young children, it just doesn't seem like something.
Or that they're reporting it in order to make you go, or as a kind of, and this
for
happened.
A reaction.
It's not drama, it's just fact.
Yeah, it's like, this has just happened. We talked about the alarm clocks going off. So over time, they actually bought 3 different alarm clocks, and every single one of them would do exactly the same thing. So it wasn't a fault with the actual original alarm clock. But weirdly, one night, Jill thought she heard someone digging in the garden in the early hours, and another time she heard a tremendous banging noise outside at 3 a.m. So it feels like this kind of time around 3 a.m. is quite significant.
It does, and I think, we're going to get to it later, but this was an area that, maybe we'll get to that later. So this was an area where suicides, at a time when it was considered to be against God's will, and sadly people were not given a proper burial if they took their own lives. they would be buried in these at crossroads.
Well, it's interesting because we were talking in the last episode how this area at one time was actually quite remote.
Yeah.
And Heigham Street was known as Hangman's Lane.
Yeah.
And so it was a remote area which would tie in people who were criminals or who have taken their own lives, were buried away from everyone else at crossroads, which is now it's hard to comprehend that because we're in such a busy area, whereas actually it wasn't the exact sort of place that they would have buried
and
people.
Just up the road from, well, there's two things just up the road, but one of them in particular that's up the road that kind of makes sense on the Hangman's Lane. It's not talking about people who take their own life. That's in reference to the fact that in 1826, at the end of St Giles Street in Heigham Hamlet, which is now the present-day junction between Unthank and Earlham Roads, and it's where the Catholic Cathedral is standing now. It was the Norwich House of Correction and separately the City Jail. The two merged in 1838.
Whenever we talk about the jail, it blows my mind that there was a jail there.
I'm
Because
going to
there's
write
not
about
much,
this.
but there's
There
not
is.
much.
I found a whole article on it.
Ah, good.
And I
Because-
found an image of it as
Oh,
well.
I was just about to say, I've never even seen a picture
So I
of it.
found
So
one. I found one the other day.
I can't
It looks like a cartwheel. It looks like a wheel. I know this is where Martha Seward's murderer is also buried underneath the Catholic Cathedral.
That's it, because when you say the prison, you think Mousehold, don't you?
So this was where the prison was between the castle and Mousehold. And there was a treadmill there. There were 120 prisoners. They had to work to grind corn. And there was a condemned cell where people who were going to be hanged were kept. And when they were hanged, apparently, although I have not been able to find this officially, but certainly anecdotally, they were buried at the crossroads on Hangman's Lane.
So I wonder how many people are buried there.
Lots,
Do
I
you think
should
lots?
imagine.
Do you think it was more burials for the prison than suicides?
Yes, I do, because I think that I would imagine if this 3 a.m. banging that Jill heard outside, if that was a burial, and she kind of likened to me that banging noise as being pretty much the top of a coffin or something being banged down, I would imagine that would be a suicide, because you would be ashamed and you would bury them under the cover of darkness while no one could see you. So I don't think that you would do those, that the executed, that they would do that at any point, because that's, you know.
One
So
thing
I
I
think
say,
that's a suicide.
the only problem, like, I have no doubts that Jill had lots of experiences here. The outside one is a really hard one because I live in the city centre. I mean, I was telling you about last night, we have all sorts of shenanigans going on outside. So you do hear bangs and shouts and voices, and yeah, outdoor stuff is I find a bit harder to...
Digging in the garden?
Well, do you know what? You say that.
They're forever digging graves around
No,
here.
but we have hedgehogs. And we have pebbles in our garden, and the hedgehogs turn. So there are weird noises. It could have been a cat having a bathroom break. I have that incident going on in my garden.
Mind, that digging is far more
I
kind
know,
of
but
grave digging.
I know I'm not, because I believe that she had experiences. I'm just trying to be like a rational
This
thing
is
for
an
the
older
outside.
lady who had no reason to tell us this, no gain, no publicity, because she's not named.
No.
I think she just trusted us with
and
her
it's like
story,
literally
didn't she?
everything else in it that she says. I'm like, it's just the outside stuff. It's harder. It's a harder to control
I
environment,
suppose
isn't it?
we should just quickly say, just in case you don't know, we've mentioned it many times before, but since medieval times, these burials at crossroads were carried out due to this belief that they were kind of these uneasy boundaries between unclaimed lands where the supernatural reigned. So therefore, it would be a penance, wouldn't it? It would be, you are here
trapped
because
there,
you are trapped here, absolutely. And it was, dark times, suicide considered a grave mortal sin, and tantamount to deliberate excommunication from the church.
Which is so sad that, like...
It's awful.
Yeah, really sad. Because these people were so much more religious than we are now. And so to them, that was, like, the worst.
Yeah.
So if somebody was feeling that terrible to take their own life...
To then be further punished.
It just, I don't know.
We've got a record, haven't we? A Norfolk coroner's record notes that in August 1794, John Stimpson, a Norwich porter, hanged himself, and the coroner ordered that he was buried at the crossroads of St Benedict's Road, and St Benedict's was the name for what is now Dereham Road. So St Benedict's continued.
Oh, so it went all the way along.
All the way along.
Okay.
So we have proof that happened, and that's just one record.
Yeah.
And there will be hundreds of those records. So underneath the bit where you got Tesco Metro and all the billboards and the is it somebody who does, I don't know, eye care or osteoth, I don't know, there are many people, and that is literally in the area where this house is.
Yeah, they wouldn't have named it Hangman's Lane.
No, that would have been
wasn't.
That's
the...
Yeah.
So Jill, obviously because stuff had been going on for so long, she decided she would look into the history of the house a little bit.
Yeah.
She discovered that a woman had died there. A Roman Catholic priest had lived at the premises. And that's the point that she found out where it was actually built, that it was very close to where these burials were. She also found out that the house had been altered slightly, and the staircase had been moved to a new position, which left an uneven wall. And this is the bit where you were saying where the sofa was.
Yeah.
So the sofa, I think, backed onto where that... Was that what you meant? It backed onto
and
where
then
the under the stairs
was
cupboard.
Her daughter's bedroom.
Yeah. Her daughter, Jill told us that she said, "My daughter said one day that she could hear scratching from the wall in her bedroom, which was the wall of the wall where the staircase that had been altered was." I had the builders in one day, and I was meeting my daughter from school at 3 p.m. and when I got back, he told me he'd seen me standing at the bottom of the stairs when I was out.
Yeah.
So that was it. It wasn't just Jill and her daughter that was experiencing. Actually, a lot of people who visited the house were experiencing.
And we did leave out quite a bit of detail, didn't we?
Yeah, she told us some stuff, and then she asked us not to.
No,
those bits that she said.
We thought that it was probably better not to. I think she would have been happy.
Oh, do you think?
We took the decision to...
I like that you say we,
yeah,
and it wasn't me.
Me. I took the decision.
I don't know.
There were parts where people had visited and then some really awful things had happened to them. And I just thought
it's not appropriate.
It's appropriate to tell your story, but not appropriate to tell other people's stories. So there is a lot of other evidence about some very bad things happening to people.
She believed that people basically... they fell victim to misfortune or illness as the build. She believed it was cursed.
Yeah.
Like, she thought this place was cursed. One workman went bankrupt immediately after working on the property. And he joked that somebody might be buried under the floorboards. Another workman badly hurt his back after falling off a ladder after his first day there. All sorts of stuff. Yeah,
they had, I'm looking here, a flower pot placed on the floor had fallen from a windowsill, and that had fallen completely upright with its contents still in it.
Yeah, that's like placed basically, isn't it?
A sparrow fan flying in a room where all the windows were closed. While watching,
this bit's a really creepy one. You read this bit.
And while watching TV one night, the announcer's voice faded away to be replaced by a childlike voice, as though playing at being a ghost. Ooh. As the voice echoed round the room, a black form flickered, and the familiar feeling of the back of the sofa being repeatedly banged by an unknown force was felt.
It does really centre around, I feel like it's something to do with under the stairs.
Yeah, me too. Which is the worst, isn't it?
I know. And the fact that the under the stairs was moved, it's almost like that's let something out. I know it was moved before she lived there.
But then it was out, wasn't it?
But it was out. So something happened under that stairs.
Yeah. What bit have you got? Oh, there you've got the hole in the ceiling. I like that bit.
Yeah. So later on, a hole appeared in the ceiling as if someone or something had pushed a finger through from above. And a slipper that fell from Jill's foot in her bedroom just disappeared. To be fair, that happens to me quite a lot.
I know. Do you know, though I was going to say that this is the kind of detail that for me makes it more true. So basically the anecdote is that her and her daughter were about to go on holiday. They were packing their stuff up. They were both sitting on the bed, swinging your legs, as you do. One slipper flies off. You go to look for it and it's just gone. Totally gone. fair enough, it could be that messy that it's gone. She said it wasn't. But when she comes back, the slipper is exactly where it would have been if it fell off her foot.
So she went away for a week, and then
she said they searched for it. They absolutely searched because they couldn't believe it.
Yeah, a slipper, if it falls off your foot, it's just gonna.
Yeah, and it's that kind of detail. It's that kind of mundane thing that if you were telling a terrifying ghost story, and you were trying to make it true, you probably wouldn't mention the fact that a slipper fell off your foot and went missing.
It would all be the childlike voice through the TV, wouldn't it?
It would all be that, and the banging, and the footsteps, and the digging, and the unexplained illness and death, and all of that. It wouldn't be, and then my slipper fell off, and I couldn't find it. But that one for her was quite, like, it was almost like that one really summed up what was going on. That it would be these small things in addition to these weirder things that that would freak you out, wouldn't it? If you
and especially on top of
if your shoe fell off now, and it kind of you'd think it had gone under the bench,
and then
you looked and it wasn't there. That is as bad as kind of banging.
In fact,
in
some ways that's even worse, because then you're like, is there something under the bench?
What? And again, things under the stairs, things under the bed. These are our worst nightmares. Aren't they?
The more I think about it, the more the thing under there's something's been released from under the stairs. But the hole in the ceiling is a really weird one as well, as if someone had pushed a finger through from above.
Yeah.
Because there is no way that would happen.
No, there is no way, because you'd have had to get under the floorboards and no. It is, and again, that's another really. I mean, I guess you start seeing things where they may not be, and presumably, if I had a poltergeist, I would blame everything on it. It's like
you probably
who had the last of the peanut butter? Well, I didn't as a poltergeist.
Yeah, you probably had become hyper aware. Sorry, there's an ant crawling on me. You probably become hyper aware of stuff, don't you? So small things that the average person would brush off as weird. You're actually like, well, how has that happened? So Jill had she had a colleague who attended a spiritualist church, and she visited the house, and as soon as she walked in, she felt ice cold at the bottom of the stairs and refused to go near Jill's daughter's bedroom. The woman apparently felt compelled to write a date on a piece of paper, which was July 14th.
Next week.
That's next week. Although it might be last week, depending on when we release this.
Or a bit further along.
For
us, it's next week.
Yeah. And the word hanging, even though she knew nothing of the area's history and association with those who met an untimely end. Obviously, by the time this woman visited, it wasn't called Hangman's Lane anymore. So, unless she did do some research before she went, but I don't know. When Jill had moved to a different house, the lady rang her to ask if it had come with her when she left the house. And Jill kind of finished on, only when I moved did I notice how different the atmosphere was. It felt like being on holiday compared with the heavy atmosphere of my previous house. We never found out what the date related to. I cannot explain what happened, only that it did, and hopefully it's still not happening to anyone else.
I know. It's quite spooky, isn't it?
Yeah. I think if she had made it, which I don't think she made it up, if she had, stuff would be happening in her new house as well.
Yeah.
Because it'll be something that she wants.
Because, I mean, I was going to talk about this in a bit, about how, the difference between a ghost and a poltergeist. And I know that you like to tell people what the word poltergeist means, so I'm going to let you do that.
Oh, it's noisy spirit.
It is noisy spirit. So, ghost activity, so there's so many differences between them. So ghost activity is known as a haunting, poltergeist activity is a disturbance. Ghosts are the spirits of the deceased who refuse to leave the realm of the living. Poltergeists are forms of energy which a living person controls unknowingly. Ghosts just appear, poltergeists make a bit of a fuss. Ghosts are seen, poltergeists aren't. Ghosts said to be the passive souls of the dead. Poltergeists are the
scary child's voice.
Yeah, that is through the television. Poltergeists are aggressive souls of the departed. Ghosts are linked to a specific place. Poltergeists are not confined to any particular area.
That's interesting, because we called it a poltergeist, but actually, listening to that list of differences, I wonder if it's more of some kind of spirit.
Ghosts are not violent. They might terrify you, but they're not violent, whereas poltergeists are. Although it wasn't violent to her, but it seems to be more. It seems to do more doesn't it?
Yeah, I guess ghosts, you don't hear of them like moving stuff. You would associate them moving, like poltergeists will have enough energy to actually physically move stuff.
Yeah,
A ghost is either a memory of something or
like stone tape through.
Yeah, like
I think poltergeists have that kind of active kinetic energy that can cause physical disturbance.
But it feels like the poltergeist is this particular haunting is related to that house
and not
her.
Yeah.
Although because we were saying I was saying, it feels like it's been released from the movement of the stairs, because obviously a lot of that sort of stuff happens around that area.
If you think of famous poltergeist stories, it is linked to the house, not the family, isn't it? So you think about, gosh, my mind is going blank. What's the famous one in America?
I was going to say Borley Rectory. That was poltergeist, wasn't it?
And it was linked to the rectory. So
what is the famous one in America you're thinking of?
Amityville. So Amityville is a poltergeist, and that's the house, not...
Do you think it's something... So maybe it's like there's an energy in the house which is unlocked by certain people.
Yeah, I think it's fed by energy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or certainly,
so
if that's what the difference is, then it's unlocked by energy, and it's kind of, I don't think that ghosts can kind of break, or generally, I don't think that people believe that ghosts can break through to the physical realm in the same way as a poltergeist.
So the poltergeist energy may always be in that house, and it is there for some reason, whether there's been some kind of like Ouija board shenanigans, or like something has brought that energy there. And then certain people who live in that house, like for me, I'm really interested in all this stuff, but I am like nothing tries to contact me or anything. It's like I'm like
well, I told you that lady who we interviewed in particular picked up on the fact there was something on the landing of my old house.
Whereas I would never pick up on anything like... Sometimes I go, oh, it's a bit spooky here, but I never get that feeling. So if I lived in that house, it's probably quite likely that I wouldn't have the right kind of energies.
So it would have to take slippers before you notice.
Yeah, it would have to
or
do
change
something
the channel when
dramatic.
You're watching Disney.
But even if it's even like the energy to give it enough form or anything, I just don't have the right sort of energy for it. Whereas if you're more open,
maybe you've
to
not met the
right
poltergeist yet.
Maybe.
It's not you, it's them.
Yeah. I don't mind. I used to be a bit upset that I don't seem to be open to that sort of thing.
Well, they've asked you to leave seances before, haven't they? So they obviously know how strong you are.
Yeah. I just have different kind of energies.
Yeah, and
it's not the right kind of energy.
Is fine. And the other thing I wanted to mention, which is nearby, is that Heigham Hall was nearby. Heigham Hall is within a minute of where this house is, or was, and it was the Heigham Private Lunatic Asylum.
Oh, I'm actually surprised their station did actually tell me that in the car.
It's very good.
But I didn't know.
Good acting. It was never a really hall. It was like a country house. It was owned by a wealthy farmer called Mark Wilkes. It became the private lunatic asylum in 1836. In 1854, it was the subject of some scandal when it was alleged that a Reverend Edmund Holmes, a well-known clergyman, had been wrongly admitted as a patient so that he could avoid a potential prosecution for a sexual offence. The case brought against the proprietor of the hospital fell through. Norwich magistrates didn't exactly cover themselves in glory. And he was, so it kind of cast a shadow over the professionalism. The grounds were huge. They would have been up to where this
I'm
house
just wondering,
was.
Would that have anything to do with the Heigham ghost, which we talked about here?
Well, who knows? I mean, it didn't close until 1960, this place. And it was demolished to make way for the collection of flats that make up Dolphin Grove. And you can still see there are echoes of this all over that area. There's like woodland that was in the park. The long footpath that leads from Old Palace Road follows the exact line of the hospital's driveway. Okay. The edges of the entrance still protrude from the grass you enter from the road. So it's everywhere. And I mean, people we know are quite obsessed with asylums, aren't they? And you had one with people who were mentally unwell right next door. So there was a lot of kinetic energy in that area. you know, and
you never know, some people who might have worked there might have lived in those terrace houses and kind of brought some kind of energies back home with them. You don't know, do you?
And we know poltergeists tend to prefer women than men, which makes you wonder, was it when her husband went?
Well, it sounds like things got worse after he left.
Yeah.
Like they had stuff pretty much straight away as soon as their daughter was born. And then when he left, it got worse considerably. So.
And as you say, emotional stress causes activity.
Yeah.
And this kind of built-up stress can unconsciously project in the form of mental energy. But
I think we have a lot more power in our minds than we realise.
Yeah,
I really do. That sounded like really like, but I genuinely do think
get that on a fridge magnet.
Yeah.
Or a tea towel. And I'll put it next to my live, love, laugh sign in the house.
I don't know, it's so nice of Jill to like feel that she could share her story with us as well.
I hope that anybody who deals with us and anybody who gives us their story is assured, and then we follow through with, if I say and if you say that we are not going to throw somebody under a bus, then we don't.
Yeah.
Because it's not worth it.
Because we don't want people to get ridicule.
No.
And we don't want people to feel afraid to share their really interesting stories with us.
No, and we also don't want to kind of unleash some kind of demonic spirit that might come and take our slippers.
No.